hello to those tuning in. Welcome to another episode of the Pros Talk. I'm your host, Dave Annable. We'll get right into things, and I'm very excited to be talking with a good friend, somebody that's grown into be a good friend, and someone I respect professionally. Willy Heidebrecht is with us. Good afternoon, Willy.
Hey, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for taking the time to come join us. Let's get right into this. I'm excited for the podcast. We're excited to bring professionals to the general public. Can you give us just, for all those listening, give us a brief who's who of yourself? Who's Willy Heidebrecht as a professional?
Well, sir, I'm an old retired school teacher. Emphasis on the old. I've been with FBC now for 14 years, and that's basically going back 20 years since retirement. I retired in 2001. I have 3 grandchildren. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I've been married for, and I like to say this year, 100 years.
I noticed that in your application, and we were looking at it, and I overlooked it, and Anne saw the application, and she lost her mind. So can you explain, why do you say you've been married 100 years?
Well, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, so that's 50 years for me. My wife has tolerated me for 50 years. Can you believe that? And, I think if she had shot me after 10, she'd have been out in good behavior in less than that.
Probably. Mine's the same.
But that's the nature of my situation. So, my life has been my grandkids, as you well know. You've commented on it. I love to cook. I love to cater. But working with FBC has been, I guess, an extension of my teaching career. I like to teach people what FBC is about. Are they perfect? Nobody is. Not one of us is. But on the whole, they do things that other companies do not. So if you don't mind, I'll just go right into the FBC. Just a bit of a bio.
Yeah. Tell them, Willy, when you do that, just kind of like give us the basis. Like we know now, okay. Willy, and I've got avenues that I'm going to go to. FBC is a big outfit. Some people might even not know what it is by initials. So, introduce us to FBC, what types of services you offer in that nutshell.
Okay. So FBC means Farm Business Consultants. And that's a bit of a confusing thing because it was founded in 1952 to do taxes in the farm sector. Over the last 68, 69 years, they've really changed a lot. And one of the things is that half of our business right now is non-agricultural. So we do almost any business sector in Canada. What we do, we tax for small business owners only. So we're limited to that. Within that, we do the taxes for the owners, the private T1 taxes as well. And that's husband, wives, everybody's included in that. We do it in a membership model. In other words, we do things that other accounting firms are not doing. That is tax planning without charging people extra for it. In-house service, unlimited access to the service. We focus on real estate, retirement planning, estate planning, succession planning. We help people with their bookkeeping. We've got a software program that allows us to do taxes in hundreds of different ways. So if your corporation, say, is a $500,000 corp, a tax account would have to do between 250 and 300 tax returns by hand to do what our software does in seconds. And a bit of an explanation to that is tax law right now, the Income Tax Act is, let's say, 4,000 pages and growing. And CRA, as we talked about governments, you and I before, they don't do anything simple. They throw tax law in there that doesn't make sense, and they never pull it out and fix it. They just keep adding more to it. And that means any auditor can interpret tax law any way they want. So 80% of tax law is like that. And the story I wanted to tell you is that in 2019, the CFIB, and I'm sure you're a member of CFIB, right?
Yeah, they're still around and active. Yeah, we run into them quite frequently.
Well, they played a game. They tested this out in 2019. They wrote out one question, and they had one person, the same person, read that question to an auditor in about 120, 25 different phone calls. They got a different auditor every time, but guess how many answers were the same for that question?
Who wouldn't even begin?
No, they got 75 different answers to the same question. So that's the nature of tax law. And FBC basically does this kind of thing. And that's why I'm with FBC, because they do it so differently. You know, that consultation means full access to our office, to a staff, and a membership model. There's no limit. You join the gym, you go whenever you want. You join FBC, you use them all the time. And that's the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that I want to highlight about FBC. And, you know, I've heard the sales pitch, and you and I, like I say, I've grown to be educated more and more. Even in my industry, you know, as an architect in the day, the Ontario Building Code is pretty much what you just described, is
Yep.
based on interpretation, all these guidelines that handcuff us in the building industry and operations of small business and medium enterprise businesses, and even up into the corporate world, are all interpretation. And if you're surveying a group of businesses and they're hitting an answer from I'll say the CRA is an administrative authority. They are not the powers that be. And it's all interpretation. So Joe, who works Monday, Wednesday, Friday, could tell you that, you know, you only have to report 5% of your tips. But then Wendy, who works Tuesday and Thursday, because you emailed on an opposite day, could tell you that it's 5.5%. You know, so these interpretations, so you're saying with FBC, you know, with your systems and methods that you have in place, it's almost that better bang for your buck system to protect you against the grander interpretation.
Yeah, so basically what happens is an auditor can interpret it any way they want. The taxpayer, who doesn't have any backing whatsoever, doesn't know, and basically suffers the consequences. Because FBC has taken all of the interpretations since the 1970s and kept track of them in a software, we can actually, like you said, show many different ways of doing a tax return, all legal, and have them supported in court. Okay, so if Revenue Canada doesn't want to follow the instructions that we give them, or at least agree with us, we'll let a judge decide. So in other words, we will take Revenue Canada to court. And that's part of the audit representation, the audit protection. We will never charge somebody for that. Okay, there are multiple examples I can show you too.
Yeah, and for that, are you kind of saying that, how do I put this? And I'm trying to speak, you know, so that we can keep the audience that way and our listeners educated. I mean, we all have an account per se. So if anyone's operating a business, we have an account, FBC or not, we have an account. With these audit protections, is FBC kind of working in the background, or is just doing more for that business to ensure that protection is there and has more stance with the CRA? Is that like a valid statement that FBC has been doing this in such a powerhouse way and in such a large scale for small business that your shoebox architect, I almost said, shoebox accountant, or that one that's only handling a few accounts, when an audit comes down the pipe, you actually, you're going to regret it possibly?
Well, let me answer that in three ways. One of the things is that, you know, under no circumstances would I ever talk down or negative about a lot of accountants.
Right.
There are some very, very good accountants out there. They're doing the job. And, you know, competing with them, we're competing on an even keel.
Right.
So
okay.
That's part of it. The other part of it is that, you know, we talked about those brown letters this morning. You get a brown envelope from Revenue Canada.
Yeah, every entrepreneur's favorite piece of mail.
That's right. What we ask you to do when you get it is you scan that sucker, you take it and send it to our office and ignore Revenue Canada. At the point that they call you and say, listen, what about it? Let's deal with that. You just direct them back to FBC. You know, got nothing to do with you. When they want to do an audit, they have to book that appointment through our office, and basically our tax rep will bring them in and be there till it's done.
Okay.
And that costs money. And so what, you know, so part of that membership means you could eat up your membership in no time and bottom line is still be protected. And then, of course, if they disagree what we do, we'll take them to court. So
yeah, I guess your analogy of where you just mentioned a few minutes ago about like you pay for a gym membership and it's there, but you can use it to whatever you want. And I guess that's the differentiation with FBC and the membership rates is, and I use them in my business too, is that you win some, you lose some. So you guys have worked out a membership price that works for worst case to best case scenario and meets in the middle. But the peace of mind that business owners get is you guys are there. You're not going to come back. Somebody might be listening right now that says, oh, well, we got an audit and my accountant tacked on all these fees. You guys are saying, no, that's included in your membership. You fax it to us and you go to bed and you sleep peacefully as if the letter never arrived.
So that's correct. And
yeah.
The third, I mentioned three things. The third thing I wanted to say is that I have heard twice in my 14 years, and the one I heard about 2 weeks ago, but the first one was I was a carb fair, and it was a young guy walking by with his family, his young kids and his wife, and he looked at the canopy that I was under, FBC. He says, I know you guys. And I said, okay, how do you know us? And I was kind of antsy about asking him. I asked him, foolish me, and he says, I used to be an auditor in London, Ontario. He says, CRA hates you guys. That was his statement. Now, but 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a prospect, a business owner, on a Zoom call, and he said the same thing to me. He says, I know. He says, I've heard auditors talk. He says, CRA hates you guys. And that's because, our guys know we have precedents. We know what we're talking about. And as far as that fee is concerned, yeah, it's probably a little more expensive than, the private individual accounting firms out there. When it comes time to comparing to BDO, to Collins Barrow, Deloitte and Touche and them, we're, if not competitive, maybe a little bit below. So with them. So bottom line is that's where our service comes from.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, it's, you're better if you did, and you might be okay if you didn't. Whereas that membership fee, for some people that have been audited in the past, it'll sound like a great deal. And for those that have been lucky enough to pay minimal fees for accounting and have never had CRA's full wrath come at them, well, they might think it's expensive.
And that's fair, and that's okay. The one thing that I have talked to people to me, I asked them, have you been audited? Oh yeah, I was audited last year, 2 years ago. What were the results? Did it cost you anything? Did you have to pay? And he says, no, free and clear, we didn't have to pay him anything. So how many days did it take to do the audit? Oh, about a week, sometimes 2 weeks. You mean that's 2 weeks of downtime where you had to sit there and not make any money? That's a cost.
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest costs, right?
That's for sure.
If I have to shut down operations for 2 weeks, I'm going to start asking my accountant how much the fine is to just make it go away immediately. Because 2 weeks lost income for, especially, we're all learning that number now with the pandemic. But
yep.
Yeah, that could be pretty costly.
For sure. Now, I wanted to tell you a story about the guy I met, and I can't tell this story an awful lot because, when I'm doing it in a presentation, people consider that part of the sales pitch.
Yes.
And I don't like doing it there. Sometimes they ask and I'll tell them, but I met a guy, a contractor, at the Equinel, basically in Kempville here, on a construction site a number of years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago. And he was busy working, and I says, I'm with FBC. I did the intro, and he said, I want to talk to you. I says, when can I call you? Well, give me a month. He gave me his phone number. I called him, and this was in the fall, about October.
Right.
I didn't see this guy until February the next year. And he said he was in trouble. He kept reminding me every time I called him that he wanted to talk to me, but he was in trouble. When I walked in the house, he and his wife were both there, and he said, we have agreed, my wife and I have accepted the fact that we will probably lose our house because of the cost of the money we owe Revenue Canada now. we're in that much trouble. I did the presentation, walked through it, and he signed up on right there that night. When he walked me to the door, he says, I feel better. He just took a deep breath and he says, I feel better. I says, it'll work for you. I mean, what can I say? I'm not going to hammer it home. The bottom line was, I saw him 3 months later on the construction site. And I says, how's it going? He says, well, 2 things. My wife and I are still married and we haven't lost our house because of just signing up with FBC. Those stories there are plenty of them. And that's one of the reasons why I keep doing this.
And that's one of the most powerful stories. I'm an entrepreneur. My wife is an entrepreneur, and we have 5 children. You know, where you started off this conversation, we're going to circle back about family being important. And family is everything to me as well. But God help the day that I have to look at somebody and say, my home is different. Like that. And you can't even use the term sales pitch. You weren't trying to do a sales pitch. You're trying to prove a point. Those little brown envelopes can make or break you, depending on the representation and the quality of reporting that you've done, which is mandated for every business in Ontario. So what's a membership fee worth your house?
Yep, exactly.
It's crazy. You know, we all pay for gym memberships and none of us ever go. But I have a feeling that we'll always use an accountant.
And there always will be accountants, and there are still people who are doing their accounting firms. And I should tell you that if you do your own tax preparation, and again, I can say this in this form where I can't say this to a prospect very often. I have to be very careful, and
Right.
It's usually with a joke on the side. But if Revenue Canada audits you and you've done your own taxes and you've made a mistake, they call that fraud, and you're guilty before you go to court.
Yeah, my father and I had a lot of great conversations before he passed, coming on 3 years ago. And he was an entrepreneur all his life, probably why I'm an entrepreneur. I mimic him, and he mentors me even as he's gone. But one of the things he told me was, because when I first got into business, I was looking at doing my own, I was trying to be cheap. I was going to try to do my own tax returns. And he told me that. He showed me on the internet the article that said an error on one's behalf is just what you said. It says it in long up for interpretation form. But ideally, you make a mistake, you've purged or perjury or committed fraud against the Canadian government.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fines and possible jail time.
And the idea is they assume that you've done it on purpose.
Yeah.
If an accountant makes the same mistake, that's an accounting error.
Yeah, and I'll share you one tax story that I have, and then we'll get to the fun stuff here. But one tax story I have is I have a colleague who was telling me that they did a cash job. And everything was fine and dandy on his end. That cash job never existed paper trail.
That's right.
The guy he did the work for that paid him cash was hiring an accountant to handle his book work, didn't have an invoice, but knew who the contractor had paid cash to do the work. So he wrote the person's name, the accountant wrote the person's name that received the cash. CRA took that name, found a SIN number, audited that person, and what people don't realize, even this one was, I believe, a $1,500 cash job. Doesn't sound like a lot of money. Why is the CRA wasting their time on that? But that $1,500 was the equivalent. The fine was the equivalent of the amount you tried to hide.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to pay the $1,500. They had to pay $1,500 in fines, and then because it was 4 years old by the time they got to him, it was the equivalent of the amount hidden per year. That $1,500 turned into like $9,000.
That's right, and exactly how it works.
That guy gets audited every year now.
Yep, that's exactly the way it works. And and was it in Orangeville? A number of years ago, CRA went to the town hall, and they asked for all building permits and rental permits. And from there on, they just, like roots in a tree, went out looking for, they found the owners, they found the people who had done business with them, and they audited virtually every single one of them. And they have the power to do that. And I often say that's the mafia in disguise, if you want.
It
But
is. Like,
nobody else can do that.
You think about my story, it was because they couldn't, and the accountant working for the contractor couldn't enter a payment as John Doe. And
Right.
they just happened to know who the person was. So you and I, if I give you cash, my accountant writes, oh, well, I know that. Dave did that for Willy. So she wrote Willy in the form, and they, like you said, went down into the roots, found Willy, knocked on his door, and that $1,500 cash job that, well, what is it, $225 that you would have paid in taxes turns into $9,000 and auditing every year.
Yep. That's a cost that is not worth it. If you can.
I should give the guy your business card.
Is he still being audited? Hey, listen, I've talked to real estate agents a lot, and they are the most audited business sector in Canada anyway.
I've heard that.
Right before construction, which is second. And I talked to a real estate agent. He brought his partner in, and she said, I've been audited 5 years. Will you deal with that? Of course we can fix that. And so she said, well, and we started talking about travel logs, mileage logs for these real estate agents. And for 4 years, they had not asked for a travel log. She'd never done one. In the 5th year, they asked her for it, and all of the other 4. I mean, that's the nature of it. And I have to say there are good accountants out there, but there are fewer good auditors.
Yeah, and I think every profession can say that too. Like, there's a lot of good architects in the world. There's some good building officials, but they're not all great. And to your story about the travel log, what I think a great message to tell some of the newer, smaller businesses that are listening, for me, that rang home, because I do a lot of mentoring with business, and I do a lot of business discussions, as you and I've had tons of them. The CRA's job is not to educate you on what is required. So that person didn't do a travel log for the first 4 years. Human nature is to believe, therefore, I must not need a travel log. But I know anyone traveling for business is required to provide, or be able to provide, I guess is the right term. You don't have to provide, but you have to be able to back up what you're claiming. So just because the CRA never asks for it in 4 years doesn't mean year 5 they can't re-ask. And then if you don't have it, correct me if I'm wrong, Willy, can they go back 7 years asking for it to check it?
They can go back. It's funny. Like, they say, well, we can right now. An audit can go back 3 years if an accountant has had done the work.
Okay.
However, you keep your tax records for 6 years or 7 years. If you've made a mistake, all bets are off, and they can go back to your great-grandfather's day. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the bottom line is they can go back as far as they want when they think it's fraud. Usually they stop at 10, but hey, if it's big enough, why stop at 10?
Like, you just popped the bubble for me. Like, I'm sitting here listening to what you just said, and I was like, what? So I've been told they can only go back. So 7 years has always been that. So is 7 years a myth, a wives' tale?
Yep, I can tell. When I first started.
That's crazy.
I got a call from a business in Kemptville, contractor. He had been defrauded by his bookkeeper. She'd taken over $1 million out of his books. They contacted Revenue Canada, and they were trying to figure out. They called me because, is there a way of rebuilding the books? An easy way to do this? Well, there isn't. So how do you claim this? They wanted to basically pay that $1 million back. That was the purpose of the visit with CRE. That's why they called them. We've been defrauded, and that means we didn't claim all the money we earned, and we owe that tax. Good on them. So when they asked Revenue Canada, can we now destroy our books, like going back, let's say prior to even holding for 6 and the rest of them, You can't do that without permission, they said.
Wow.
Well, can we have permission? No. So, it's like tax law. It's all interpretable. Any auditor, any officer of the CRA can tell you what they want to say rather than what you want to hear. And the bottom line is, you can. They tell you, 6 years is enough. 7 years, you can keep them that long. You can throw them away after that. But when it comes right down to it, I don't trust it. Not anymore. Not when you hear that kind of a story where they wouldn't even give you permission.
So does that mean that storage units are a write-off to store 20 years of tax papers?
Absolutely.
I'm just going through it. I mean, it's crazy. My son has his own business now. So that's a third generation entrepreneur. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, I'm Mr. Smarty Pants for my kid, right? Like I can pass on all this genius information that my father told me. And as I mentioned, he passed a few years ago. And I found out, I think when you have talks with family, even my dad, I looked up to him so much. He could do no wrong. And in those last few years, he started telling me, I think he was really hard on me and he wanted me to succeed. So it was that tough love, right? Like we want to really challenge those. I'm a challenge guy. So you want something done, challenge me. Tell me I can't do it rather than I can, and I will do it. Yeah. And he did that. And then in the final few years, we actually had a chance to chat. And I found out he was telling me, like, I don't know how you became so diligent with money, David, because I was horrible. And I was like, wait a minute. We had a great life. I thought you were good with money. And he just laughed at me. So, I'm relaying this information and I'm listening to you chat about the 7-year myth is the big one because I'm still dumbfounded. Everyone listening is going to be like, wait a minute, I just burned years 8, 9, and 10. Like I just shredded it. And let's go stomp out the fire right now, people. But my son, I'm passing this information and I'm like, oh my God, I just lied to him. I told him to keep his books for 7 years. Now, thank God he's only been in business for 2 and I got 5 years to make up for it. But that's crazy, Willy. Like
just in case people didn't understand what I was saying, they can go back as far as they want. Are they going to go back to your dad's day? No, I don't imagine that's ever going to happen. Right. But will they go back in your life 10 and 15 years if they figure that they have got a case for fraud? I do believe they will. So telling somebody to burn their papers is not a good idea.
Just in closing, so that we can, we don't want to bore everyone with tax talk because we got a few interesting things about you that I want to get into. But all right. So did you also say that, like the rule of thumb, you said something about 3 years. So if you did your taxes, they can go back and audit you. But you said if a professional accounting firm is doing your books, you said something about 3 years. Can you just explain that?
Well, the Revenue Canada will only audit 3 years when an accountant does your work. They assume that,
So I hire FBC. My audit protection fears should be limited to 3 years of the last filed year.
Your fears, yes. Our protection, no.
Oh, no. And I think we clearly got that you guys are there to have us all together. But that audit protection from CRA end is now 3 years because we're hiring a professional accounting firm.
If you've been using an accountant, they're not going to go back more than 3 years.
Okay.
The difference is, very quickly then, if you go from one accountant to the next, the guy you left isn't going to help you out. That's a bottom line.
No.
If we take on your accounts and you get audited for things that we haven't done 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we will do that as part of the membership fee that you're paying at the beginning. There's no extra cost for it unless you are currently under audit, which case there's a retainer that we charge. But other than that, we'll go back as far as you need.
That's crazy. I'm an former teacher, family man, and all around great guy. I mean, I know that about you, and I'm an adamant believer that we learn something new every day. And well, there you go, folks. I just learned my thing for the day because I thought that 7-year thing, and it's a wife's tale. That's great. So Willy, let's get into a few things here. So I mean, and I'll let you kind of take the lead. I learned. Angie learned here at the office, at the Approved Professionals office. You catered her to a nice little sit-down lunch with some homemade soup and you've told me these catering stories, and I'm a big guy. I love food. I love to cook. I'm adamant. I tell people all the time, that's my de-stressor. To go home, some people are like, why do you rush home and then make these giant meals? I lose track of time and all stress when I'm cooking. Is that the same for you? And is that why you get into catering and cooking?
I got into catering and cooking when my wife was teaching piano about 50 years ago in the same house where our kitchen was. There wasn't even a door. I came home from teaching and I said, when's supper? And she says, I'm teaching, look after yourself. I started cooking. From there, I started catering. I love it. You're right. If I have a whole Saturday off and I start cooking at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll finish with supper and I'll be in the kitchen all friggin' day.
But kudos to your wife in that story. Did you just tell me that you picked this hobby up out of desperation because you were going to starve to death?
I never feared starving. I just decided I wanted to eat it my way.
I just picture, I'm a retro TV guy. I just pictured the voice of Tim Allen doing like that mother, that you better cook for yourself voice, like you got home, you've been working, you've been grinding, you've been dealing, I imagine teaching at the time. So you're dealing with everyone else's kids. You come home, all you want is a nice juicy burger. And she's like, I'm teaching. No. And boom, Willy the caterer was born.
Essentially, in a short term, yes. It took a while. I enjoy cooking, and I always have. I started cooking when I was a little kid. My mother was packing peaches on the farm, and she says, there's something. Go help yourself. Make your own. It's was nothing new. But the catering part of that came. I actually belonged to a Lions Club in the Park Hill area north of London, and one of the things that they loved doing was running events where they fed people. Yeah. And I had, in the process of working with them, gotten hold of a pork barbecue, a spit, and I eventually built my own, and then started cooking pigs. And they said, hey, let's do a pig roast. I'll tell you, there was a learning experience for me in that one. We did a pig roast for a bunch of bikers, I think it was, and they wanted beef and pig. They wanted both. So we had about 100 and 150 pounds of roast beef there. We had a 200-pound pork on the spit. And you realize that half that beef was found in the garbage later.
Wow.
Because most people said, oh, we'll take beef. Can we taste the pork? So you give them a little taste. All of a sudden, they're back in line getting full meals, and they'd thrown the pork away or the beef away. It's not as sweet as barbecued pork. It's not.
No, I tell my kids every single meal, somebody in my household will be, why'd you make that? I don't like that. My response, and I can picture you saying it to me in a different context, but did you try it first? One of my staple dishes, and I messaged you the recipe once, the stuffed mushroom caps. And did you ever make them?
Well, let me tell you. I get the, not the little mushroom caps. I get them on occasion, but mostly I get the portobello mushrooms, the big ones.
Yes.
I fill them with the shrimp.
Yeah.
And then I get, do you like feta cheese?
Love feta cheese.
You just mix up a whole batch of feta cheese with chopped onions. Now just mince the onions. Yeah. Mix it up with a little bit of salt and pepper and put it on top. And then cover it with cheese that you did and bake it. And man, one of those one mushroom cap, one portobello mushroom will do a meal for you. It is amazing.
Yeah, so it's almost like a stuffed pepper, but a mushroom version, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And with my kids, like I've got one that's not a big fan of seafood. I got another that just the word mushroom makes her cringe.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when she's listening to this, but she'll literally say, "Hey, Dad, can you make those mushroom cap things?" And for people that don't know, a mushroom cap is really just a stuffed mushroom. The recipe I shared with you, Willy, was in a steamed dish, garlic butter. You take the stem out of the mushroom, you put a piece of shrimp in it, garlic butter, mozzarella, and you go to town. They are God's gift to mushrooms.
Make the mushroom a little bigger, put 2 or 3 in. I never did little ones. I always.
Yeah, we use it like an appetizer. So that'll be a treat or a side dish that I'll make to like a a stuffed bruschetta pork or a chicken parmesan. That'll be kind of the appetizer or the side dish that I put with it. Because I mean, you and I'm aspiring to be married 100 years like you. I'm trying to entertain my wife because she puts up with a lot of crap from me, as I'm sure everyone that knows me knows it's the truth. It's kind of like I almost wanted to ask you when you mentioned you were married 100 years is like, did you like if somebody goes to jail and they're serving time and it's not convicted time, they actually get a day and a half for every day holding. So did you add that to your formula of 100? Like, have you paid some in lieu of? No. Has your wife paid some in lieu of?
No, it's full 50 apiece. Full 50 apiece. Mind you, like I said before, at 10 she would have got up for on good behavior in 7 or less.
That's awesome. So then from there, I mean, you know, we're coming to the tail end of this, and your grandkids. I know every time I talk to you, we end up on the topic. Anything you want to share, or you know, what's like? I'm a big family guy. We keep circling around the word family here. Happily married, big family, and spend the time with the family that you can over work. But those grandkids of yours are pretty special to you.
Well, I guess the only thing I want to say about that is that for Christmas this year, and this maybe not sure if you know this, I spent a few weekends and evenings in my workshop, and I built them blanket boxes, fine blanket boxes.
Okay.
Hope chests, cedar-lined hope chests. And you know, that was my Christmas gift to them this year. And I spent as much time in that shop as I can. If I'm not teaching or not doing FPC, not cooking. But yeah, they are really special. The 18-year-old right now is doing on a gap year, basically working at McDonald's now for the rest of the year, looking to go back to school in the fall. The 15-year-old is going to turn 16 next month. No, he has turned 16. Yeah, he's going to be, he's 16, going to be 17. And my 15-year-old granddaughter, the youngest one, I can still dance around the kitchen with her walking on my feet.
And that's a testament, right? Like, I've got 4 boys and a girl, and if like it is, and I'm gonna say hats off, and I'm always intrigued when you talk about them because you light up, you glow. At the end of meetings with the approved professionals, we end up on the topic, or if you miss a meeting, we always find out what you were doing with your granddaughter or the whole group of them. And I think it's really cool that I've got somebody that I'm talking to, and when we're talking about the topic grandkids, most people are going to go to that, you know, the number is going to pop. Okay, it's a cute 5 or 6 year old. Let's be honest, teenagers are probably the punishment of all parenting. And you're telling me that you've got this rock solid relationship, and I've heard the stories, you and I know what kind of relationship you have with those kids. And to say an 18 to a 15-year-old, you said, hats off to you, sir, because that's amazing.
Thank you. No, if we weren't for COVID, they'd be sleeping over every weekend.
Well, quickly tell us about that. So let's forget the FBC aspect of things. This is a great, you know, I don't want any of my interviews to end up in this massive pandemic because, you know, to be honest, we're all sick of it and we're all tired. I don't even think sick of it, we're tired. But here's a guy who loves his family, has done everything for his family, married 100 years, and he's got these teenage grandkids that you went to build this rock solid relationship with into those troubled years. Whether they're troubled teenagers or not, everyone's fearful of the teenage years. You know, for granddaughters, the boys are alive and they exist now. 18, they're starting to get their feet on as a young adult. Work starts taking precedence over going out for an ice cream cone with grandpa, all that stuff. What role has COVID played, in your opinion, to that relationship, and how hard has it put a strain on you for somebody that has such a great relationship with some grandkids?
Well, they're not sleeping over on weekends. They're close by. They're 200 meters door to door, so they're within our bubble. They're keeping it clean, and you know, that hasn't changed other than they're not sleeping over. And they would, even the 18-year-old says, "I'd like to come home to sleep over." You know, so that's part of it. But the formula for this is very simple. And I told this to my wife. I told this to my daughter when the youngest was born. And said the oldest was born I carried her 3 days into it. I had her in my arms walking out in the bush, and I told my wife, my daughter, my job left in this world is to make those 3 kids love me more than anybody else in the world. That's been something I've been working at for 18 years. I've written each of them a book. The 18-year-old got hers on her 18th birthday, and these are letters from Grandpa that I would write in the book and give to them.
That's amazing.
And so from there on, yeah, they come over. Last night we watched The Good Doctor, the 18-year-old and I. We used to watch Survivor together. I'd walk over to her house. We'd sit down when she was 5 years old, and we watched Survivor together. That was our date on a Wednesday night.
And I'm amazed. I'm amazed. You've told me a few stories, and I think a testament. I heard you getting emotional. I mean, that testament to what you feel about those kids. But what people have to realize is you're so dedicated to it. You are still working. You're a retired school teacher. You're working for FBC. And I know I'm going to say it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to make a statement of who I've become. You love to talk and learn about people. And I see that when you interact with the group. But I'll tell you, if it's date night with one of those kids, all bets are off. They are the priority. Because you and I've had this discussion. I'm like, well, listen, Willie, I want you to make a presentation, blah, blah, blah. Nope, that's grandkid night, that's grandkid night, that's grandkid night. And it's not even a, well, I could move that. Those kids are the gospel.
That's it. You got it. And they have to be.
It's amazing.
They have to be.
Hats off to you, because it's I think it's key. We're losing that in life today. And I try to teach that to my kids. Like, at the end of the day, we're the only ones going to be there for our children, for our wives. That's the whole role behind it. And to still see it going live, and like say an 18-year-old, sometimes my 18-year-old I want to kill. But if Grandpa was still around, he's wrapped around her finger as much as she's wrapped around his.
I was going to say that, I'm not unique in that. People listening to this are going to say, yeah, that's my grandpa, that's my dad doing with my grandkids, that's me being with my grandkids. There's lots of them out there. You wouldn't know it because you don't hear it. I'm sure that's the other end of it. The opposite is there too. But I venture to say that the majority of grandparents, they still do it if they can.
Yeah, and hey, whether you're going, there's probably people out there that go further than you do for it, but that's amazing. Now, you've got one thing in closing that you wrote on the Forty Gap: the difference between a $5 hamburger and a $10 burger. Some people would fill this out, and I'm like, okay, they didn't want to answer. It's just sarcasm. I doubt that's the truth with you. What is the difference between a $5 hamburger and a $10 burger?
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to include the whole from the beginning on. When you're looking at accounting, and you think you're going to a store and you see a $5 hamburger on the menu and you see a $10 hamburger on the menu, I know where I can get a $10 hamburger and love it, and I'll not buy a $5 hamburger. If you consider accounting in the same way, that's the way to look at it. On the other hand, I can send you a video of a burger that I created. It's a pound of meat.
Yeah.
And you put, and I'll show you I can send you the video. My granddaughter videotaped it.
You send that picture, and we'll make sure it makes it up on screen for the viewers.
Well, it's not okay. I'll send you a picture, but I'll also send you the video because I put it in the contest with FBC. It's FBC's Got Talent, and I won $100. The funny part of that was I was the only entrant, but it is a massive burger. It is phenomenal. It's got onions. It's got a roux of onions and vegetables and garlic and just sautéed, and then in the middle, because you make a hole in it, in the middle of it, and then you top it with a sharp cheese, and you put it in the barbecue, and you don't need a burger bun. I'll send you pictures, and I'll send you the video.
You do that, and at the end of this podcast, we're gonna have all your contact information on how everyone listening can listen to Willie and get a free burger, right?
Hey, I'll tell you, if because of this video, they contact me personally, don't contact FBC directly, contact me because that's the best way of tracking it through our company anyway. I will If I can't send you the burger, I will send you the recipe.
There you go. So if people right now listening, and when they contact Willy, to even I'm sure you'll be in agreement. So I'm going to put the pitch out here. People that listen to this podcast and reach out to Willy and book a sit-down time with Willy to hear all the benefits of how FBC can help them, with the promo code hamburger, and I'm going to put the promo code across the screen, hamburger.
Absolutely.
You get a free recipe for the $10 burger that will knock it out of the park to any $5 burger you can.
Okay, I'll get that recipe to anybody that wants it. As far as making it's concerned, I will cater a wedding with everybody having one. That's part of my catering thing. But that burger, yeah, we'll do what I can. But
I think it's awesome. I think anyone that sits down and has a conversation with you like I've just done, and ends up with a recipe for a big juicy burger. I mean, that's just go home, people, make the burger with your family. Willy, I want to thank you. I told you before we went on the air that it was going to be a relaxing conversation. I hope it was. Thank you for sharing everything, personal, work, talking to us today. The goal of this podcast is to dig in behind the scenes and give people kind of that relaxing image. They're gonna call you and they're gonna sit down, and you're just a regular guy with some grandkids and knows how to cook a mean burger. So thank you again, sir. I'll put all your contact information up. The Pros Talk is brought to you by the Ontario Approved Professionals, Willy and FBC. You guys are proud members. I'm proud members. Everyone should go on to www.ontarioapproved.ca or ontapproved.ca and find your local trusted vetting professional. So, Willy, take care, sir, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.